I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're diving into one of the most compelling debates of all time. Paul Timothy Jensen, author of Thinking About God Again for the first time, brings us a fascinating dialogue between an atheist and a Christian that explores life's biggest questions. Is God real? What about morality and evil? Get ready for an insightful conversation that challenges your perspective and sparks your curiosity. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Paul, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Logan, thank you so much. It's an absolute privilege to be with you.
It's a privilege to have you on the show. This imaginary conversation between an atheist and a Christian is almost Socratic in nature, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. And I've tried and I've done my best to be fair to both sides and to look at the weaknesses of each side and the strengths of each side. Now, I'm a Christian, have been my entire life. So that's clearly the perspective from which I approach these topics. But I want to be fair, and I've tried to do that.
What are some of the tough questions hurled at you by the atheist that you created for this dialogue?
Uh, Virtually all of the questions in this book have been asked of me by students or colleagues or adults. And the focus is, does God exist and love us? And so I've tried to approach those questions from a philosophical point of view. My bent is toward analytic philosophy, and I believe that in the late 20th century and early 21st century, Christian analytic philosophers have done major work on these questions. So I have used those resources in trying to be fair to both sides.
One of the arguments made in support of God has always been the watchmaker argument, that if you find a watch on a beach, you look at it, you see the precision, you realize it had to have a creator. The same is true when we look at our world. Is that something you agree with as well?
Well, yes and no. I uh, I perhaps am unusual, though I hope not, in that I accept all of modern science: physics, chemistry, astronomy, cosmology, and perhaps most importantly, all of biology. I think that when one studies these things, one comes to believe that all of it, including biology, modern biology, glorifies God. So, Darwin, in a sense, perhaps really did defeat the watchmaker argument. Okay, but the argument from design, which is what that is, has had a huge renaissance based on cosmology and astronomy. And when the American astronomer Hubble, discovered that the universe was expanding, that was a major discovery, resisted by many atheists because they knew where it went. Does mean, universe has a beginning. What a discovery. Now, since that discovery was made, it was further discovered that the very beginning of our universe was created with a special recipe. And if that recipe had been different, we would not exist. So it's called the fine-tuning argument for God. Now, again, it's an argument from design,
Yeah.
but even the most ardent atheist astronomers have acknowledged this recipe looks like design. Now, they may say it's not design, but boy, if you understand that the fine tuning of the universe 13.7 billion years ago was required for us to show up, that's a powerful argument.
Exactly. So basically, you're saying it might not be outright creation, like let there be man, but all of the mechanisms that were put in place for man to evolve from that primordial soup were a part of God's creation, and hence the
Absolutely.
evolution of man. Yeah.
That's my view.
Hmm.
Uh, it certainly appears to me, Logan, as though our planet is a species generating machine. Now, if that's correct, and I think it is, that takes a great deal of thought and engineering to create a species generating machine. I think that brings glory to God. And so here we are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. It's more of a fine-tuned approach, and I think it's a more nuanced approach, and I think it satisfies people's intellectual curiosities as well. Let's talk a little bit about the questions you grapple about morality versus evil. What are
Okay.
some of the issues that you tackle in the book?
Okay. So for belief in God, the most difficult problem is the problem of evil, and that we might say is the problem of the kinds of evil and the extent of evil. Now, I think we can focus this a little bit by saying that God has created a dangerous world. That's what our world is. And so we need to ask, why would a God who is good and all powerful actualize a dangerous world? That's the focus, right? Now, there are within that, as sort of subspecies, there is the question of natural evil, floods, hurricanes, forest fires, disease, viruses, as well as the question of moral evil. Moral evil is intentional harm to other people. Now, I think it's easier to deal with the question of moral evil because it certainly appears to be the case that we do things that are wicked voluntarily. But in order to have good, you also have to have the ability to do it voluntarily. It's not good if it's something that you're forced to do or threatened to do. It's only good if you do it voluntarily. Okay. So in order to have the possibility of moral good, you must have the possibility of moral evil. That seems to me to be the case. But now how about natural evil? Well, natural evil is actually more difficult to deal with. But I think that there is a good explanation for that. It appears to me, I think to many people, that the best thing that can happen to us is for us to develop virtues.
Mm.
In fact, my brother and I, who practice law together, have been discussing this recently. And in the Constitution, where it says the pursuit of happiness, that meant to the writers pursuit of virtue. You cannot have people pursuing virtue without danger. Uh, Compassion requires danger. Courage requires danger. Uh, uh, the other classical virtues, prudence, Temperance, right? Again, they require danger. So that may not be a completely satisfactory answer to the problem of natural evil, but I think it is a good answer. And in some cases, we're simply going to have to say, look, we don't know. And there we have a separation between global evil and local evil. So, local evil is this: why did my father die of lung cancer when he never smoked? There's no answer to that. There is no answer to the problem of local evil. We will never know the answer to that, or at least at the moment we won't. But that's a different question
Right.
from global evil. Global evil is, why did God create a dangerous world? And why did God give human beings the ability to do things voluntarily?
Fascinating, really is fascinating because you made me think about things I hadn't thought of before, which means you're doing your job. Because the basic question that comes up a lot during our theological discussions on this program are, why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah,
And the answer basically is because we're not marionettes on a string. We have free
yeah,
will. We can do good. We can do
yeah,
bad. But like you
yeah,
said, cancer, why was that even created? Why
yeah,
do people have to suffer through it? Why are children born at, with a tumor on their brain at
mhm,
birth, and they're
yeah,
going to suffer and
yeah,
die until they're 2 years old
yeah,
and then die a miserable death, and their parents will be heartbroken. So there
yeah.
is a lot of bad and suffering and evil in this world. And
There
for
is.
me, it doesn't negate God,
Yeah,
but it does open up a whole uh, box of questions I didn't have before because they usually think of evil as perpetrated by an evil person,
yeah,
and that's not always the case.
yeah. All true, all true. I think that it's helpful if we go back to St. Augustine, and he explained, he advocated, he affirmed something that is called the privation theory of evil. Okay, so that means that evil was not created. I think that's correct. In the same way that darkness was not created. Darkness has no properties. It
Right.
doesn't travel at any speed, but
Mm,
light has properties. It
mm,
has this odd property of being both a wave and a particle, right? It travels at a specific speed, 186,000 miles per second. That's the speed limit of the universe. All right. Well, as soon as you actualize light, you actualize the possibility of darkness, the absence of light. And in the same way, as soon as you actualize health, good health, you actualize the possibility of bad health. It's unavoidable. So I think the privation theory of evil is a good theory. I think it's incomplete. I think it's incomplete because when you and I suffer disease, a virus, for example, we're suffering something concrete, not something that is merely an absence, right? So I think the privation theory is incomplete. Nevertheless, I think it's a good place to start. And so I'm an Augustinian in that way. Augustine said that when you take away hearing, you have a privation and you get deafness. You take away sight, you have a privation, you get blindness, and so on and so forth.
Fascinating stuff for sure. You've done a lot of thinking about God, a lot of thinking about morality, a lot of thinking about creation, and all of these wonderful thoughts, these ponderous thoughts are within the pages of the book we're talking about today. It's called Thinking About God Again for the First Time. It brings us a fascinating dialogue between an atheist and a Christian that explores life's biggest questions, such as, is God real? What
Mm-hmm,
about morality, and evil?
mm-hmm,
These are
mm-hmm,
basic questions that all of us have in our lives, and they are questions that you will find absolutely fascinating as Paul breaks them down and examines them as a philosopher would, as an attorney would, as a theologian would. And he can wear all of those hats for sure. Paul, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much for
Logan.
joining me. My
Thank you so
pleasure.
much, Logan. My absolute privilege to be with you.
Such a privilege to have you on the show. I could literally talk to you all day long. But as Groucho Marx would say, but we're running out of time. But you did a great job. I appreciate it, sir. To the folks at
Thank
home,
you.
I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.